In every country, elections are one of strategy. So in the US today, you see policy people, strategists thinking around messaging, thinking around mapping constituencies. In Nigeria as well, election is one of strategy. And the strategy of election in Nigeria is very simple. Bribe INEC, bribe Judiciary, commandeer the security, and they are done. The people that destroyed 23 election is INEC and Judiciary. The rules were clear. The Electoral Act is not perfect, but it was very clear. I'm surprised that any judge who understands administrative law, which I have taught in the university for years, which I studied under the best in the world, would argue that an entire regulation built on a law, an act, a regulation, directing that you will do X, you can choose to do Y, when there is legitimate expectation and detrimental reliance. INEC was totally wrong, and the courts, Supreme Court downwards, got it wrong. When an agency created under the law with an enabling act and the constitution that says you can make rules, makes rules, those rules are law. They can unmake it through rule-making process. If they don't, they are bound to obey it. Results should have been transmitted electronically. I'm ashamed. I have a PhD in law and I can stand anywhere in the world to dispute the best and brightest. I was ashamed that the court affirmed that INEC can just walk away from the law. 5 years I was a regulator of electricity. When we make tariff, it's the same way INEC makes rules. We make those laws, tariffs. They are legal instruments. They are binding in law. I hold INEC responsible and I hold the courts responsible for the failure of the elections.
It's a very pathetic and painful situation. The kind of thing that makes you wonder if we're truly running a democracy or just pretending to. Imagine a country where the electoral body, the same INEC that is supposed to protect our votes, can just wake up in the middle of the night and announce whatever it likes as presidential election results. No explanation, no transparency, no breakdown of how they arrived at the figures they pushed out to Nigerians. Millions of Nigerians watching in disbelief when results started appearing out of nowhere. States where people clearly voted one way were suddenly showing different outcomes. And when you ask for the evidence, INEC gives you nothing. Then when you go to court, hoping that justice will prevail, the same court tells you that the evidence you brought is invalid unless it comes from INEC. Tell me, how does that make sense? I take someone to court because I believe they did something wrong, and the same person I'm accusing is the one expected to bring the document that will prove my case. How can that ever work? How can we build a fair system like that? Up till today, INEC has not provided any convincing explanation about how Bola Ahmed Tinubu was declared the winner of that presidential election. They just wrote figures and read them out. No transparency, no accountability, nothing. You even heard it from a senator himself that INEC could not, up till this very moment, provide the Labour Party with the Form EC8 for Lagos State. That form is not just a piece of paper. It's the foundation of the result, the real proof that shows what happened at the polling unit. If INEC cannot produce that, then what exactly are they protecting? What are they hiding? How can you say someone won an election when you cannot even show how the votes were counted, how they were transmitted, or how they were collated? We're not talking about emotions here, we're talking about facts. Every result must have a trace from the polling unit to the ward, to the local government, to the state, and finally to the National Collation Center. That is what builds trust in democracy. But instead, INEC has made Nigerians lose confidence in the process. Many young people who voted for the first time are now asking themselves if voting even matters. They saw how their effort, their hope, and their faith in the system were simply brushed aside. This is why I fully support the idea that INEC must be compelled by law to show how every candidate wins and not just announce numbers. They must publish the complete breakdown of votes from every polling unit, display the forms publicly, and make them available to all parties involved. That is the only way Nigerians can begin to trust the process again. And if truly the government wants to prove it has nothing to hide, then Tinubu himself should support this kind of reform. Let him sign it into law. Let there be full transparency in our elections. Because if your victory is genuine, you should have nothing to fear from the truth. We cannot keep living in a country where elections are treated like secrets. The people deserve to see how their votes are counted. Democracy dies when transparency disappears. INEC owes Nigerians an explanation, and not just words, but hard evidence. Until that happens, many will continue to believe that the will of the people was stolen in broad daylight.
There is no doubt, as has been said, that if there is one pressing matter before this 10th Senate, if there is one pressing matter before this 10th Senate, it is the issue of how we sustain and deepen and ring-fence the electoral system. Because if that fails, then we will only be a democracy in name. We'll only be a democracy in name. And it's a great shame, it's a shame, that election period after election period, we seem to be regressing. I know that in this country, in 2007, President Yar'Adua, right there on the inaugural podium, restated his determination to review the electoral system that brought him into office. After Yar'Adua, 2015, a sitting president who appeared to be losing without even waiting for the final tally to be called, President Jonathan made that historic call. And I was there in the room with him. The effort was to deepen and elevate Nigeria's democracy. And thereafter, 2019, we didn't see how that improved our system. So in some way, without casting blame or pointing fingers, we appear not to have built on the momentum that has been established. So, Mr. President, if there is one major achievement we must make in this 10th Senate under your leadership, we plead that it should be this issue of electoral reform.